Run! Malik's instincts screamed, but his body refused to move. Hidden among the tall reeds by the river, he froze, his 13-year-old heart pounding like a drum. From his hiding spot, Malik could see everything. The black sedan had screeched to a halt on the bridge. A man stepped out, dragging what looked like a struggling figure toward the railing. Malik's chest tightened. Was he really about to? The answer came in an instant. With a brutal shove, the struggling figure was sent plunging into the dark waters below. The splash was deafening, cutting through the eerie silence of the river. The sedan's tires screeched as it sped away, leaving only Malik and his thundering heartbeat behind. His mind raced. What do I do? Call for help? Run? His eyes caught movement in the water, a hand barely breaking the surface before it went still. Malik swallowed hard. Whoever that was, they didn't have much time. A voice inside him, quieter but firmer, urged him forward. You can't just stand here. Do something. His body moved before his fear could stop it. Shoes kicked off, fishing rod abandoned, Malik dashed down the muddy bank. This is insane, he muttered to himself. But insanity wasn't the problem. Time was. And whoever that person was, they were running out of it fast. The water hit him like a slap to the face, cold, merciless, and dragging him under before he could even catch his breath. Malik surfaced, gasping, and frantically searched for the figure he'd seen moments ago. The current was stronger than it looked, pulling him downstream. There! His eyes locked onto the lifeless form of an older man, face pale, hair slicked against his skull. Malik kicked hard, fighting the current, his arms cutting through the water with desperation. Hold on, he shouted, though he knew the man couldn't hear him. Each stroke brought him closer, but his limbs burned as if they were on fire. Finally, Malik reached him, grabbing the man under his arms. His weight was dead, dragging both of them down. No, not now, Malik growled through gritted teeth, summoning every ounce of strength he had left. He kicked furiously, the shore feeling miles away. The river seemed determined to keep its victim. After what felt like an eternity, Malik's fingers scraped against the muddy bank. With one final surge of energy, he hauled the man onto solid ground before collapsing beside him, lungs heaving. The world spun as he tried to catch his breath. Come on, breathe. Malik turned to the man, panic gripping him. His face was gaunt, his chest frighteningly still. But then, a faint rise and fall. He was alive. Barely. A deep gash on the man's temple trickled blood, mixing with the river water still clinging to him. Malik's stomach churned, but he shook off the nausea. This wasn't the time to lose his nerve. My phone! He patted his pockets. Empty. He must have left it at his fishing spot. The nearest hospital was over an hour away, and the sun was setting fast. Predators would soon roam the riverbank. Malik's eyes darted between the unconscious man and the path leading home. There was only one choice. I can't leave you here, he muttered, as much to himself as to the stranger. I'm taking you home. With trembling arms, Malik hefted the man onto his shoulders. Every step was a struggle, his legs threatening to buckle under the weight. But the voice in his head wouldn't let him stop. Keep moving. The wooden door of their small home creaked open, and his mother's voice called from the kitchen. Malik, is that you? Dinner's... Her words cut off as she turned, her eyes widening at the sight before her. Who? What happened? Tanya rushed forward, dropping the dish she'd been holding. I found him, Malik gasped. In the river. Someone threw him off the bridge. Tanya's face paled. What? Malik, why didn't you... I didn't have time, Mom, he interrupted, his voice trembling. He was going to drown. I had to do something. Tanya hesitated, torn between shock and the instincts of a nurse. Help me get him to the couch, she finally said, her voice steadying. Together they eased the man onto their threadbare sofa. Malik, Tanya began, her tone sharp. This is serious. We need to call someone. No, Malik blurted, surprising even himself. He's alive, but just barely. We can't wait for help to get here. Please, Mom, you can save him. Tanya studied her son's desperate expression before letting out a heavy sigh. Fine. But this doesn't mean we're keeping him here. Malik nodded quickly, relief washing over him. As Tanya grabbed her first aid kit and began tending to the man's wounds, Malik stood close, his heart pounding. Whoever this man was, someone had wanted him dead. And Malik had no idea what kind of danger they might have just brought into their home. Tanya's hands moved with practiced precision as she cleaned the gash on the man's temple. Malik hovered nearby, his chest tightening every time the stranger groaned faintly in pain. Blood soaked through the towel, and Tanya pressed harder. "This cut is deep," she muttered, mostly to herself. "He'll need stitches." Her eyes darted to Malik. "Bring me the antiseptic." Malik rushed to the kitchen, grabbing the bottle with shaking hands. As he handed it over, he couldn't help but ask, "Mom, is he going to make it?" Tanya hesitated, glancing down at the man. His face was pale, his breaths shallow. She pursed her lips. "I don't know, Malik. But if he doesn't, it won't be because we didn't try." The room fell silent except for the occasional hiss of antiseptic meeting open flesh. Malik's mind raced. Who was this man? Why would someone throw him off a bridge? He stared at the stranger's bruised wrists and the dark marks along his ribs. It looked like he'd been tied up and beaten. "Who are you?" Malik whispered, his voice barely audible. The sound of the old TV in the corner suddenly snapped them out of their focus. The evening news anchor's voice cut through the tension in the room. "Breaking news tonight. Richard Greaves, a prominent billionaire and philanthropist, has been reported missing. Authorities say his car was found abandoned near Riverway Bridge, raising concerns of foul play." Tanya froze, the antiseptic bottle slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. Malik's head whipped toward the screen. A picture of the missing billionaire appeared, a man with sharp features and silver hair. "It's him," Malik said, his voice trembling. "Mom, it's him, the guy on the couch." Tanya stood slowly, staring at the stranger's face. The resemblance was undeniable. Her stomach churned. "Richard Greaves," she murmured. "What in the world have we gotten ourselves into?" The man stirred just before dawn, his body racked with a weak cough. Malik was the first to notice, shaking his mother awake. "Mom, he's waking up!" Malik's voice was urgent, a mix of fear and excitement. Tanya hurried to the couch, kneeling beside the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice steady but gentle. The man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and hazy. His lips moved, but no sound came out at first. After a moment he managed to rasp, Where am I?" "You're safe," Tanya assured him. "My son found you by the river. You were hurt." The man's gaze drifted toward Malik, who stood nervously in the corner. "You saved me?" Malik nodded, his throat dry. "Yeah, you were in the water. I pulled you out." Richard tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. "The bridge," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I was on the bridge. They pushed me." "Do you remember who it was?" Tanya pressed, her tone serious. Richard's brow furrowed as he struggled to recall. "A car. Black. There was a man. His face." His voice trailed off, frustration evident as his memory failed him. "It's all a blur." Tanya placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's okay. You've been through a lot. Rest." But Malik wasn't satisfied. "I saw it," he blurted out. "I was fishing by the river. A black sedan stopped on the bridge. Someone got out and threw you over." Richard's head snapped toward the boy, his eyes wide with shock. "You saw it?" Malik nodded. "I couldn't see their face, but I saw the car. It sped off right after." Richard leaned back, his breathing heavy. It was him. It had to be. "Who?" Tanya asked, her tone sharp. "My son-in-law," Richard said, his voice trembling with anger. "Alan Foster. He's married to my daughter, Emma. I trusted him with everything, my finances, my foundation, my family. And now—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening. Tanya's face hardened. "Why would he do this to you?" Richard's eyes darkened. Greed. I discovered he was stealing from me, siphoning millions into secret accounts. When I confronted him, he snapped. He said I was trying to destroy him, ruin his life. I didn't think he'd go this far. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by Malik's soft voice. What are we going to do? Tanya turned to Richard, her expression resolute. You can't stay here. If he knows you're alive, he'll come after you again. I can't leave, Richard said firmly. Not yet. I have evidence, records that prove everything he's done, but they're locked in my office at home. If I go to the police without it, he'll deny everything. And if he finds you here before you get that evidence, Tanya shot back. Richard met her gaze, his voice low. Then you're all in danger. Tanya let out a sharp breath, her fists clenching. We'll figure something out. But if you're staying here, we need to be prepared. From the corner of the room, Malik spoke up, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. I'll help. Whatever it takes. Tanya turned to her son, her protective instincts flaring. No, Malik. You've already done enough. But, Mom... No buts, she interrupted, her tone firm. This is too dangerous. Richard placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, a faint smile on his face. Your mother's right. You've already saved my life. That's more than anyone could ask for. Malik frowned but didn't argue. Deep down, he knew they were right. Still, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Malik spotted the car the next afternoon. It was a sleek black sedan parked just down the street from their house. At first, he didn't think much of it. Just another car in the neighborhood. But when he saw it again, in the same spot the next day, unease began to creep in. Mom, Malik said cautiously as Tanya chopped vegetables for dinner. Do we know anyone who drives a black sedan? Tanya paused, turning to face him. Why do you ask? There's been one parked down the street for 2 days now. Nobody gets out, and it doesn't feel right. Tanya's face darkened. She wiped her hands and peered through the curtains, careful not to be seen. The car was there, just as Malik described. Her stomach tightened. Listen to me, Malik, Tanya said, her tone low and urgent. If you see that car again, you don't go near it. Come straight home, understand? Yes, ma'am, Malik said, though his curiosity burned. That night, Tanya shared her concerns with Richard. Could it be Alan's men? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard's expression grew grim. If Alan knows I survived, he'll stop at nothing to find me. That car isn't a coincidence. We can't stay like this, Tanya snapped. You need that evidence, Richard, but my son, our family, can't live in fear while you figure out a plan. I know, Richard said quietly. I'm not staying here any longer than I have to. We'll move soon, I promise. The next day, Malik's unease deepened when he noticed the same car parked near his school. Its presence was like a shadow he couldn't shake. After the final bell, as he walked home through a quiet side street, the car appeared again, rolling slowly past him before coming to a stop. Malik's heart raced as the driver's side door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped out, his eyes scanning the street before landing on Malik. Hey, kid, the man called, his tone too casual to be comforting. Got a second? No, Malik stammered, taking a step back. I need to get home. The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. It'll just take a moment. Come here. Panic surged through Malik as a second man appeared behind him, blocking the way. Easy, kid, the second man said. We just want to talk. Malik bolted. Without thinking, he ducked into a narrow alley between two buildings, the shouts of the men ringing in his ears. His lungs burned as he sprinted, zigzagging through the maze of alleys. Finally, he dove behind a dumpster, pressing himself against the cold metal as footsteps approached. Where'd he go? One of the men barked. Check the alley. Malik held his breath, his heart hammering so loudly he feared they would hear it. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded. He's gone. Let's get back to the car. Malik stayed hidden until he was sure they were gone. When he finally emerged, his legs felt like jelly, but he forced himself to keep moving. He ran all the way home, bursting through the front door and collapsing onto the floor. "Malik!" Tanya cried, rushing to his side. "What happened?" They tried to grab me," Malik gasped, his voice shaking. Tanya's face went pale. She looked at Richard, who was already standing, his expression stone cold. "Alan's men," Richard said. It wasn't a question. "This is too dangerous," Tanya said, her voice trembling with fear and anger. "We can't wait any longer." Later that evening, Tanya called her brother James, a retired detective. When he arrived, the tension in the room was palpable. "Tell me everything," James said, his sharp eyes darting between Tanya, Malik, and Richard. Richard recounted the events, from Alan's betrayal to the attack on the bridge. By the time he finished, James's jaw was tight with barely restrained anger. "So, Alan's stolen millions, tried to kill you, and now he's got men out looking for you," James said. "And you have proof locked in your house?" Richard nodded. "It's in a safe in my office. Bank records, transactions, everything to expose him." James rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "All right. First, I'll have some of my old contacts watch the house. If Alan has people stationed there, we'll know. Second, I'll help you plan a way to get that evidence without alerting him." "And Malik?" Tanya asked, her voice tight with worry. James glanced at the boy who sat silently, his hands clenched into fists. "I'll make sure he's safe. You've got guts, kid, but leave the dangerous stuff to us, okay?" Malik nodded reluctantly, though the determined look in his eyes didn't waver. The next night, James returned with updates. "Alan's people are watching the house, but they're sloppy," he said. "We can work around them." Richard nodded. "Then we move tonight. The longer we wait, the riskier it becomes." Tanya's eyes widened. "Tonight? Isn't that too soon?" "If we wait, Alan will tighten his grip," Richard said firmly. "We can't afford to lose momentum." James placed a reassuring hand on Tanya's shoulder. "I'll be with him every step of the way. We'll get the evidence and get out before they even know we're there." Malik watched as the adults finalized their plan, his heart pounding. He wanted to help, to be part of the fight, but his mother's earlier warning rang in his ears. This was too dangerous. As the clock struck midnight, Richard and James prepared to leave. Malik stood by the door, watching them with a mix of fear and admiration. "Be careful," he said quietly. Richard gave him a small smile. "We will." And with that, they slipped into the night, leaving behind a house filled with silence and anticipation. The house stood eerily silent under the cloak of darkness. Richard and James parked a block away, moving cautiously toward the estate. The faint glow of security lights illuminated the front yard, where a pair of men in suits loitered near the gate. James peered through a pair of binoculars. 2 guards outside, probably more inside. Alan's definitely worried about someone snooping around. Richard's jaw tightened. "Then we don't have much time. The safe is in my study upstairs. Once we're in, I'll grab the files while you keep watch." James nodded, slipping a small lock-picking kit from his pocket. "Let's move." They crept along the side of the property, keeping low behind shrubs. James worked quickly to bypass the side door lock, his movements precise and silent. Within seconds, the door clicked open, and they slipped inside. The house felt oppressive, every creak of the floorboards magnified in the quiet. Richard's heart pounded in his chest as they ascended the staircase, his eyes darting to every shadow. As they approached the study, the faint sound of footsteps echoed from below. James held up a hand, signaling for Richard to stop. He leaned over the railing, spotting 2 more guards patrolling the ground floor. "Stay quiet and stay fast," James whispered. Richard nodded, entering the study and heading straight for the safe. He knelt before it, his hands shaking as he turned the dial. Behind him, James kept his gun drawn, eyes fixed on the doorway. "Come on," James muttered under his breath, glancing back at Richard. "I'm almost there," Richard whispered, his voice strained. Suddenly, the faint hum of conversation floated up the stairs. Richard froze. "They're checking the upstairs," James said, his tone urgent. "We've got maybe a minute." Finally, the safe clicked open. Richard reached inside, pulling out a thick folder stuffed with documents. He stuffed it into his jacket and nodded at James. "Let's go." But just as they turned to leave, heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. "Check the study!" a voice barked. James cursed under his breath, shoving Richard toward the opposite doorway. "Go! I'll hold them off." "No!" Richard hissed. "We're in this together." "Don't argue. You're the one they want." James's voice was firm, leaving no room for debate. He squared his shoulders, gripping his gun tightly. Richard hesitated for a split second before slipping out the side door of the study. Gunfire erupted behind him, followed by the sound of shouting. Richard's pulse raced as he sprinted down the hallway, navigating the maze of the house. He could hear the guards closing in, their boots pounding against the floor. He spotted the open window at the end of the hall and made a beeline for it, throwing himself through just as one of the guards burst into view. He hit the ground hard, the folder clutched tightly to his chest. James emerged moments later, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead but otherwise unharmed. "Got what you need?" James asked, his breathing ragged. Richard nodded, his chest heaving. "Let's get out of here." The two men disappeared into the night, the damning evidence finally in hand. But as they made their escape, both knew the danger was far from over. The courtroom buzzed with tension, every seat in the gallery packed with reporters and onlookers. At the defense table, Alan Foster sat stiffly, his face a mask of calm arrogance. Across from him, Richard Greaves waited at the prosecution's table, his expression unwavering. The evidence he had risked everything to recover was now on full display. The prosecutor began with a commanding voice. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal, greed, and an attempt to silence the truth. But thanks to the courage of a young boy and the resilience of Mr. Greaves, we now have the evidence to expose Alan Foster's crimes." One by one, the prosecution laid out their case. Screens displayed forged documents, offshore accounts, and falsified transactions that Alan had orchestrated. Witnesses, including Alan's former business associate, Thomas Crane, delivered damning testimony about the embezzlement scheme. Alan's attorney tried to shift the blame, suggesting the transactions were errors or misunderstandings. But the turning point came when Richard took the stand. "Mr. Greaves," the prosecutor began, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" Richard adjusted his tie, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "Alan Foster is my son-in-law. I trusted him with my finances, my foundation, and my family. I believed he had my daughter's best interests at heart. But I was wrong." "And what happened when you confronted him about the missing funds?" Richard's gaze hardened. "He denied everything. When I presented the evidence, he became hostile. That night he attacked me and threw me off Riverway Bridge, leaving me for dead." The courtroom fell silent, every eye fixed on Richard. The defense objected, claiming speculation, but the damage was done. The final piece of the puzzle came from Malik, who bravely took the stand. "Malik," the prosecutor said gently, "can you tell the court what you witnessed on the night Mr. Greaves was attacked?" Malik swallowed hard, but his voice grew steadier with every word. "I was fishing by the river when I saw a black car stop on the bridge. Someone got out and threw something, or someone, over the railing. I jumped into the river to save him. That's when I realized it was Mr. Greaves." Alan's attorney tried to rattle Malik, questioning his memory and perspective. But Malik held firm, his courage shining through. By the end of the trial, the jury had heard enough. After just 4 hours of deliberation, the four-person stood to deliver the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Alan Foster, guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and attempted murder." The gavel struck, and the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Alan was led away in handcuffs, his once pristine facade crumbling under the weight of his crimes. The sun set over the quiet neighborhood as Malik sat on the porch, staring at the horizon. The past weeks had felt like a whirlwind, saving Richard, surviving the threats, and now seeing justice served. Richard joined him, lowering himself carefully into the chair beside Malik. "You did something incredible, Malik," Richard said. his voice filled with quiet admiration. Malik shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. I just did what felt right. Richard chuckled softly. Sometimes doing what's right takes more courage than anything else. And you have that courage. Days later, Richard returned to their home with an envelope and a promise. Inside the envelope was a scholarship for Malik to attend St. Gabriel's Academy, along with a check to support Tanya and Malik's family. I can never repay you for what you've done, Richard said to Tanya, but I hope this helps your family the way you helped me. Tanya blinked back tears, nodding as she accepted his gift. Thank you, Richard, for everything. As Malik prepared for his first day at St. Gabriel's, he paused at the mirror, looking at his reflection. For the first time, he saw himself as more than just a boy from a small town. He saw someone brave, someone capable of making a difference. What do you think about this story? If you were in Malik's shoes, would you have had the courage to act? How would you handle the weight of uncovering such a dangerous truth? We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were to rate this story, how many points would you give it out of 10? Share your feedback in the comments below. Your input helps us create even more compelling stories. If you enjoyed this journey of bravery and justice, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales like this one. Thank you for watching, and may your day be filled with courage, inspiration, and endless possibilities. See you in the next story.